Hey guys, it's Austin here with Jeeping, and in today's video we're going to be doing a battery cable upgrade on this 1978 Jeep J10 truck. Now the cables we're going to be installing today are by JeepCables.com. He custom made them for this J10 right here, and I apologize in advance, it is a little bit windy and I'm working outside under just a tarp cover right now, so hopefully the audio isn't too bad. But anyway, let's get started. Alright, so with this kit I got from JeepCables.com, all these cables are 4-gauge wire. It's all high quality. It comes with a fuse block in here. It also comes with military grade battery terminals that we're going to be replacing the old ones with. So that way we shouldn't have any problem starting this thing, because this actually does have a problem starting because some of the old wires are just so frayed that you have to jiggle them sometimes just to be able to get this thing started. So this is going to be a big upgrade and should hopefully help cancel out any ignition issues trying to get this thing started for the most part. But if you guys want to get a set of Jeep cables, check out JeepCables.com. He makes cables for a variety of Jeeps, and now recently he's just started making cables for full-size Jeeps just like this. Alright, so if you guys don't know, this is a 1978 Jeep J10 truck with the AMC 360 V8 engine, and we're basically just going to start replacing cables that are closest to the battery. Then we'll work in the engine bay and get the wires from the alternator going to the battery as well as the starter. So starting off over here, this is where our battery would sit. It's in the front compartment on the passenger side, and we're going to start off with this positive wire that goes to your starter solenoid. That's all over here, and as you can see down here, it's pretty frayed. So this is actually the main issue, and why I'm actually replacing all these cables is just it's so frayed and you have to jiggle around the wires just to be able to get this thing started. So I'm going to start off by removing this, and I'm actually going to attach a ground cable to the front fender over here because there actually isn't one, but you want to make sure you have a ground cable going straight to the fender. We have a ground cable right here, but it just goes straight to the block. But it's always good to ground in both places, as it is on most modern vehicles now. Okay, so starting over here on the back side of our solenoid, we just have our wire that goes to the positive terminal of our battery. And to take this off, we just got a 9/16 nut, and we're going to take that off and put the new cable on. Alright, so now we got our new power cable right here to replace it with. It's nice from Jeep Cables. They label everything so you know where everything goes. So over here we have a battery positive. So this is going to go to our positive side of our battery. Then over here is labeled the relay solenoid. So we're going to take this, fit it over the end, and I'm just going to loosely put the nut on for now because later on we're actually going to be putting our alternator cable on the same post over here. Okay, so over here on the inner fender, we just have a 3/8 bolt that's going into here, and it looks like there used to be a ground eyelet that was right here on the fender, and it's since broken off. So I'm just going to take this off, and I'm actually going to drill it out and either put a 5/16 bolt in there, so that way it's a nice solid connection, other than this rusty self-tapper. Alright, so now I'm going to drill out this hole to a 5/16 for our new hardware. Unfortunately, I didn't bring a wire brush with me to clean that up, so I'm going to figure out a way to clean up that surface so that way we get good metal contact. Alright, so unfortunately I can't really clean that off good. Definitely going to have to come back in here and clean that up, but I think it'll be good for today. So I got my new 5/16 bolt threaded in, holding it from the back side from inside the wheel well. We got our black cable over here, and this side says fender. The other side is going to go to the negative side of the battery. Just going to fit this over. Have a washer and then a nut. And so our negative terminal is going to be somewhere in this area, so I'm just going to kind of line this up. And if this has to come over like that, I'm just going to tighten it in that position so that way there's no pinching in the wires. Alright, so now the next cable that we're going to be replacing is our negative cable that goes and grounds the engine block. And this was actually the main ground cable that was on this truck, and they didn't have anything else at the time when I first saw this vehicle. So we're going to be taking this off. It's basically a 9/16 bolt that goes into the cylinder head over here, and then it just has the terminal that's on the other end over here. So hopefully I can get this off. It does look a little corroded, but hopefully it'll break free. Alright, so I got that bolt free. Good thing it didn't snap off the engine block, otherwise that would be a headache to get out. Alright, that side is removed. Alright, so now we got our new ground cable to the engine block, and over here it has the engine block side, so we're going to put our bolt through here. And ideally, again, it's getting windy out. Anyway, so ideally we would like to clean off that surface, but it still has a little bit of exposed metal on there, so I'm just going to hopefully be able to get away with just grounding it like that. I am going to come in here another time and clean off those surfaces. And then I'll just snug it up with the ratchet. Okay, so since we got our two ground cables over here that connect to the positive terminal, I can go and attach our terminal on here. Just make sure you have the right terminals on. This one has a N on it, so it's a negative side. So I'm just going to take off this nut. Since these cables are so thick, they don't really want to move, so I'm actually going to flip one of these to the other side so that way it's not bound up, and when I tighten this down it doesn't bend the tabs. Alright, now we can tighten these up. Like so. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to be working on is actually the alternator charge wire, and I'm not 100% sure if this alternator actually has a built-in regulator. I don't think it does, because this wire that comes from the alternator, this red one right here, it actually runs all the way into the cab, and instead of a normal voltage meter, which is on modern cars and everything, this actually has an amperage meter to see if your alternator is charging. And this isn't a normal just one wire alternator. There's actually two other wires going into here, so not 100% sure, but the ones I saw to replace online, they're just a normal one wire alternator. So if this doesn't work for charging, the way I'm going to be wiring it up, I can simply just replace the alternator, since it might not even be working as it is right now. But first thing I'm going to do is basically just undo the old main power cable right now and just get it out of the way. I'll have to fully take it out another time, but basically we're going to have a new wire coming off the back of the alternator, and JeepCables also included a fuse block, so we're going to mount that to the inner fender over here, and then that part is going to go to our main terminal side over here on the battery, so that way it's a little bit more cleaner and we don't have it going all the way up to the battery over here. So I'm going to start off and undo the nut on the back of the alternator back here. And this nut back here is a 7/16. Alright, so that cable is actually not going to come off. I ended up just snipping it for now, but I'm going to end up replacing this alternator because the stud is actually moving with the nut on the back side, so it's all broken in there, and best thing to do is just replace that with a one wire alternator that we know for sure works. But what we can do right now is actually install our fuse block and our cables, just not connecting it to the alternator. So I decided I'm going to mount our fuse block over here, so that way it's kind of close to the starter solenoid. I'm just going to drill some holes in the inner fender right here and put about a couple 1/4 inch bolts. We can mount that there and route the rest of our wires that go to this fuse block. Alright, so I went ahead and mounted that fuse block to the fender over here. There is 4 holes on it, but I just utilized 2 and put some 1/4 inch bolts to the fender here, and it's actually nice and solid. So what I'm actually going to do is mount the cables for now, but since I don't have it hooked up to the alternator, it's going to be, you know, wiggling around, so I don't want it to arc out on anything. So what I'm going to do is just basically take out the fuse for now, so that way there's no power going to the wire that goes to the alternator. And they did come with 2 fuses. There's a 150 amp and also a 200 amp. So then the shorter size goes to the fuse over here. It's all labeled. I'm just going to take this off and put it on the terminal. And then over here on the other side of the solenoid where we left that nut loose, I'm going to take that off and put on our other side for the battery cable over here. And this is going to give our main power basically to the battery for charging. And then we can tighten that up with a 1/2 inch wrench. Now I'm going to tighten up this side. It's just a 9/16. And then we have our rubber boot that fits over this, so that way we don't accidentally arc it out. So now on the other side of the fuse block, we got our cable that's supposed to go to our alternator. I'm just going to attach it on the fuse block here without a fuse, and then whenever we replace that alternator in the future, we'll go ahead and attach this. So same thing, we got the boot side, which has our fuse. We're going to put this on the other end of the fuse block. Okay, so now we're pretty much getting wrapped up around here, so I'm just going to put our positive terminal onto the positive cable that goes to the positive side of the starter solenoid. So same thing with the negative one. You just got to pull off this nut on the back side of the terminal and and then put on our main positive cable. The terminal is going to sit just like that in the battery, so I'll tighten it up in this position. Alright, so over here on the driver's side of the engine bay, we have a ground strap going from our engine block all the way over here to the fender. So this one over here, it's pretty bad and corroded, and it's kind of in a weird spot where it's mounted to the fender. It's kind of hard to see, but basically we got our horns over here, and it's like mounted to the underside, and there's actually a rust hole right there in the fender. So I'm just going to unbolt it from either side and drill a new hole into this clean metal over here, and then we can bolt on our ground cable. Alright, let's just say it was easier to rip out the rust hole than it was to remove that bolt, but we're going to be putting it in a new location, so we're just going to have to deal with mounting these horns later. So we got our new bolt. Okay, so now we're going to work on the starter wire. This is probably going to be the most difficult one because we have to get underneath the vehicle and disconnect it from the positive side of the starter. But we are going to undo this nut right here. This is the wire that goes down to the starter. It's the opposite side of the solenoid as we were working before. So it's the same size nut. It's just going to be a 1/2 inch. We're going to take that off now. Alright, so we're underneath the Jeep right here, and on the passenger side of the motor, underneath it, we have our positive wire. The other end is right here, as you can see, and we just have a simple bolt going to it. I believe that's a 7/16, so I'm going to take that off and put on our new cable. Alright, so with that positive cable attached, we can go up into the engine bay and attach it to our solenoid. While we're under here, we'll take care of the last ground cable. It's actually kind of hidden under here, and it's actually going from our engine mount all the way to the frame. So we have 2 bolts basically, one there and one kind of hidden up into there. It's all crusty down here, and that's going to be our last cable, and then we should pretty much be done. Alright, so that's what your last ground should look like. We have it bolted to the engine block over there and all the way down to the engine mount down over here. It was kind of a pain in the butt to get in there. I could barely even fit a wrench, can't fit a ratchet because it's too much in the way of the engine mount. So fortunately I wasn't able to film that, but here it is installed. Alright, so the last thing we gotta do is take our other end of our cable that goes down to our starter and hook it up to the starter solenoid over here. Alright, so that's pretty much going to be it for installing all of these cables. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to hook up the alternator today, but that's going to be in a later video when I replace that. And if you want to make this a little bit more neater, you can zip tie them into place, put little cable holders, that way everything is nice and secure. Fortunately, I don't have this because I'm not working at home right now. I don't have, all of my tools and everything. But what I'm going to do is actually throw a battery in this thing, and this thing hasn't started in about 2 or 3 months, so might need a little bit of starting fluid, but we're going to see if we can get this puppy running. Alright, so we got our positive and negative terminals. Alright, so I'm going to take off this air filter. That way I can just spray some starting fluid right into the carburetor. Alright, so I got someone else cranking in the inside, and I'm just going to spray it over here. Alright, give it a shot. Alright guys, that's pretty much going to be a wrap for today's video. Hopefully you guys found this helpful. Nothing was really too difficult to do. It's just if you have an older vehicle like this, obviously it's going to be harder to get those bolts off, and some of them might snap or whatnot. But actually this went pretty smoothly for it being this old. If you want to get yourself some Jeep cables, visit JeepCables.com. I highly recommend them. I've had them on my Jeep Cherokee as well as their XJ headlight harness, and I'm just impressed with the quality on them. I apologize once again for the bad audio. Hopefully it's not too bad with the wind. Hopefully you were able to still find it helpful. But make sure to like and subscribe to the Out Jeeping YouTube channels to help keep these videos coming, and hopefully in the future we'll have some more videos on this J10 truck right here. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to leave them below and I'll be happy to answer. Until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.